Hello and welcome. You're listening to Start Again with Shauna Lee, the place where you will be reminded that it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So stick around if you're ready to vibe higher and be inspired to chase your dreams. Together, we will uncover your soul's truest desires. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. Hey, everyone, and welcome back. I am introducing to you today a new friend. Her name is Wendy Sterling. Listen, you guys, she's amazing. She's written a few books. She has her own podcast. We're going to hear about all the things. But first, Wendy, thank you so much for being here.
Goodness, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Me too. I love to jump right in and be like, tell us all the things. Who are you? What do you do? So I'd love to hear about your books and your podcast. Specifically, the way I like to kick this off is, how have you embraced this idea of starting again?
Oh, I love starting again. It used to be something super scary. And to me now, it just lights me up inside because I see so much possibility and opportunity around starting again. And I feel like it's something that is a gift that we can do at any point in our life. And ultimately, the first time I experienced my starting again was about 7 years ago, when I was suddenly faced with a very unexpected divorce and separation from my college sweetheart and father of my two boys. You know, I had never thought anything other than he was my soulmate. And suddenly I was confronted with the possibility that we would not be together. And ultimately, the next year I spent really finding myself and ultimately learning that I had turned my back on my own reflection and instead saw myself through his eyes, which was something that I learned as a little girl from my family. And I perpetuated it in my marriage. And ultimately, what I embarked upon was trying to figure out who I was. And in that process, ultimately discovered what choosing me looked like. And choosing me meant that this man was no longer meant to be a part of my life because we had different values. We wanted different things. Our priorities were not in alignment. And so that literally became the beginning of me, starting again. Right. And, it didn't just involve my personal life, but part of that was I also chose not only to file for divorce and to start my life over in my 40s with two young kids, but I also left corporate. So So I decided to start over, to start again in two different areas of my life, which I'm not saying anyone out there should or shouldn't do. It was right for me at the time because I really needed to hit the reset button to ultimately honor what was best for me.
Yes. I often say, there's an easier way to do it than the way I did it, but I typically,
hindsight is so brilliant, isn't it?
It is. I tend to go out in a ball of flames. Like, I tell you what, when I have had big changes in my life, it's like everything is in an uproar all at the same time. I'm like, could have chosen a simpler, easier path than that. But I am with you. Like, those start again moments, whether by choice or not, are an opportunity. And being able to open your eyes to, hold on, what's possible now, I think is super empowering and very inspirational. In fact, what I've built this whole podcast around. So when you think back to your story, what do you think is the most inspirational part of it?
Ultimately, what I think is the most inspiring is the fact that it wasn't linear. I think that we expect, I'm a planner, I'm a type A personality. And I had such a plan for myself of how I thought things were, quote unquote, going to go. And as I'm sure you can relate, it never goes that way.
Nope.
And so one of the things that I really had to release and learn how to surrender to was the fact that I could only control what I had control over. I couldn't control him. I couldn't control outside circumstances. And so ultimately I really had to, I mean, I feel like I started kindergarten in my 40s, right? Everything I needed to learn happened in my 40s, and and not in a bad way.
Yeah.
I do believe that things happen for a reason. They don't happen to us, they happen for us, and they happen at the time when we're open to it and when we're ready to see it and when we're ready to embark upon it. And one of the things that I say all the time to my clients is that, I don't see obstacles as things that get in my way. I see them as pivots, right? It means that I'm supposed to pivot and turn a different way, which is why I stop believing that there's a linear path that we're all supposed to be following in this life.
Yeah.
I do believe we are all souls here having human experiences, and there is something bigger than us that is guiding us, and you can choose to surrender and follow that path, or you can fight it and make it harder for yourself and for
A
things
whole
to
lot
take a
harder
lot
for
longer.
yourself.
Yes. Right?
Yeah. I think that's the theme that comes out time and time again as I am having these conversations is this life path we're on is anything but linear. It is meandering. There are ups and downs. Everyone describes it a little bit differently, but it basically is not point A to point B. Like we are on a journey, which means there are obstacles, there are pitfalls, there are huge wins and amazing things. I think you're absolutely right when we can kind of lean into that and realize our situations and our circumstances are happening for us and there's value in it, even if it doesn't feel amazing in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is value in the experience you're having.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's hindsight that helps us see the value, but we always get there.
We do. And again, it's not what you think it's going to be either.
Oh gosh, yes.
I think that we live in a time where there's so much fear. And I feel like that is also why we are trying to grasp onto things and trying to explain things. And, I'm sure you've experienced this as well with the people that you've come across and you've worked with, but it's like we live a life based on assumption and, what I call sort of like this facade and this hologram. Think about social media. We put out what we want other people to think our life is, right? So many people were shocked at my now ex-husband and I having gotten divorced. They're like, you guys were the perfect couple. You were the perfect family. If this can happen to you, oh my God, this can happen to us. And, I think that there's so much, what I hope people are starting to see is that, so much of the narrative is actually controlled, right? And you try to control it as much as you can until you come to the realization where it's like everything just explodes and you ultimately can't control what is out of your control. And what I have learned through all of my starting over processes is, I live authentically now. I don't sugarcoat. I don't pretend. I don't, I'm real. Like I have bad days. I have days where I, have memories of my old life and my ex-husband that come up, and I don't judge myself and go, oh my God, you still love him. No, I don't still love him, but he was a really big part of my life, and something new is coming up. Right. And I feel like, instead of leading with assumption, what I say is instead to lead with curiosity. Right. Which is something I don't think we do. I think we take things at value instead of like really inquiring. And I don't mean to be distrustful. I mean, like, be curious, ask questions, right? From like a learning perspective.
Yeah. I love the idea of curiosity because to me, there's a playful nature to it. There's an innocence to it. If we think of like the word curious, I'm thinking of children being curious. I'm thinking, cats are often called curious, but there's a very playful nature to that. And I feel like when we just get curious about what's happening, emotional triggers are a great one for me to talk about because I think it's when we have been triggered by something and we have these huge emotional outbursts of some sort, like it's so easy for us to judge ourselves and be critical and be hard on ourselves and what the hell's wrong with you? But instead, if you just get curious and go, oh, interesting, I wonder why I had that response.
Right.
It's so much lighter and it feels so much better. And I feel like when we enter a state of curiosity about any of the things, any horrible thing that is happening in your life, I feel like that allows us to look at it and gain a different perspective. One of my favorite mantras is I'm willing to see things differently, which I think is the biggest obstacle for a lot of people, is just being willing to look at it differently. And I think that starts with that curiosity that you're talking about.
Yeah. And even before that, it is, taking a minute to just take a breath. Like I have a saying, and I even have bracelets that say there's power in the pause, right? So just taking a moment to just breathe so that you can get to a place where you can reflect, right? Where you can get curious. I used to be somebody who I would react like and it is a part of who I used to be that I have owned and that I have reined that part of me into to that place. So if anybody listening can relate to that, like this is a really important tool that you get to learn, is to just, really notice when that reactive piece of you pops up. And like you said, it's just take a minute and breathe, right? Pause and get curious about what is it that's coming up, because 99% of the time, it's not what you think it is, right?
Yes.
Like when I would blow up at, my ex-husband, it was like he, I'm being dramatic, but it's like, he would walk in the back door instead of the front door. And it's like, what? It has nothing to do with him coming through the back door, right? It's it's, it's something underneath, which is typically, an emotion or a need that is not being met. And so, it's, well, I feel unseen because you didn't give me a heads up. You were going to come out, you were going to come in the back door and not the front door. So I feel very unseen because this wasn't communicated ahead of time, right? So it's like, there's always something underneath that we don't give ourselves the opportunity to really dig into.
Oh, for sure. And I see this with a lot of couple conflicts as well. I'm like, it's never about the thing you're arguing about. Like, it's just not. What's underneath that? Let's dig in a little bit more, because that's the problem. And I feel like it's a great analogy for how we typically approach life. It's like we're always up on the surface trying to deal with the thing. And I'm like, those are just Band-Aids. That's just the symptom. Like, what's underneath that is causing all of the other things? I love that saying, there's power in the pause. Because I think another important aspect of that, for women especially, but I think just in general, our society is built on this idea of we need to be productive and be busy and stay busy. And we're almost shamed for resting. And I know a lot of people who feel guilty for just pausing. And I think there's such power in the pause. And some days I'm like, oh, I'm not doing anything. Well, you are doing something. You're resting. You're refueling your body. You're doing what's important. There's power in the pause. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, honestly, this month is Wendy's self-care month. So Wendy, I'm talking in the third person, but I literally decided, I was like, I need a month. I need a month to just recharge. I have been going. And ultimately I knew that I needed to indulge in some self-care. And I'll tell you that, to me, what that means is really just being Wendy, whatever that means, whatever that looks like. And my doing has just felt super easy because it's like, well, I'm just being me, right? And to your point, I think that we live in such a masculine energy, not masculine male per se, but masculine energy, which is like a doing energy. We live in such a masculine dominant energy world where it's like checking boxes, right? That's how we judge our success typically, right? Like, oh, I didn't get to 50 of the things that I wanted to do today, but it's what about all the things you did do today? Like,
exactly.
It's like, why don't we focus on the positive versus the negative, because I feel like it's almost like our default is the negative because it's so easy. It's how we've been conditioned.
Yep.
And what we get to do is really start recognizing when we do that and shift ourselves back into, instead of looking at what I didn't do today, well, let's look at all the amazing things I did do today, right? And part of that is what I call self-care. It can be as simple as, today we're going to focus on the things that you got done, not the things that you didn't.
I love that.
It's like the things that you did get done, right? And I think that society has a little bit of a misperception around what self-care looks like. And we complicate it and we think it has to involve money and all this time and all this energy.
Go to the spa.
Exactly. It's the first thing everybody says, right? Yep. It's like, sure, going to get a mani-pedi is fantastic. And yeah, I put that in my schedule, but every day I indulge in self-care. Every single day. Some days it's, like I said, focusing on the positive. Some days it's writing out 3 things I'm grateful for. Some days it's walking outside in the backyard just to get some fresh air and some vitamin D on my skin. Sometimes it's walking my dog, taking a hike, whatever it is. And I think it is so incredibly important because, to kind of get back to the theme of your podcast, right? It energizes you and it just gets you like in a mental, physical place to really be able to jump back in to do something, right? Like, think about, it doesn't take that long, right? It can take a minute or two, right? Sometimes it's standing up. I'll put music on and have a little dance party or pretend, my Sharpie is a microphone, right? And just, we don't do this enough for ourselves. And I feel like we have the opportunity to like restart at any moment that we want. It doesn't have to be this major life transition. It can be something that happens, on a daily basis.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a big, giant thing.
Right.
We're so good. I think women tend to be better at, I love to stereotype gender stereotypes on this podcast, apparently, because I talk about this all the time. But I just think as mothers, we are nurturing. I think as women, we tend to be more nurturing. I think it's easy for us to look at someone else and be like, oh gosh, we think about any one of our girlfriends. Oh, well, she's super stressed out. I bet she could really use XYZ. Like we could in a second know what she could do very quickly, easily, for free for herself to make herself feel better. But we don't do that for ourselves. It's almost like we should just go stand in the mirror and be like, all right, if you were one of your friends and you see this hot mess that's happening for you today, what does she need? What does she need? And go do that. And I think you're right. Sometimes it's in the time that a song plays, you could dance around your living room and feel 100 times better.
Absolutely.
Like, it depends on what it is.
Be your own best friend. We forget that. Like we are so, and this is part of what I call people pleasing, right? Like we're so quick to want to help other people, to fix other people, right? We're all about external, but then when it comes to internal, we're like, oh, that's selfish.
Yes.
Oh, I don't have time for that. And it's like, well, at what point in time did other people come first? I think one of the things that I honestly really learned in my divorce was how important taking care of me was, or is, I should say, and my boys now, my boys are now 17 and 14, and they know and they have seen how when I take time out for myself, that they get the best version of their mom. Yep. Because I'm not depleted, because I'm not frustrated, because I'm not angry. Like I'm able to engage with them. And honestly, it's about being able to be present. I mean, how many times, or how many of you guys listening are always, it's like, dinner, I got to pick up, I got to this. What about the now, right? You're listening to this podcast.
Right.
So you're being in the now right now. Like, how else can you do this throughout your day? Like, how can you get present? I mean, I used to brag that I'm the best multitasker. And really all I was saying was that like nobody got my full attention.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so true. Yes.
Right? I used to be like, I am the queen multitasker. Like I wore a badge. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I don't think that's a badge I want to wear, because basically I'm telling people that they never get my full attention.
Yeah. My kids call me on that actually, because I have also said the same thing. It's funny because everything you've said, I'm like, I sound like you are talking with the words I say. I'm like, yes.
I told you
That's what I
before
said.
we hit record. I'm like, I feel like we're like the same person.
Yes. But my kids call me on that because I do have a tendency to fall back on what I call kind of my status quo. And that is multitasking, doing all the things, go, go, go. And listen, I can get a lot of shit done in that mode, but nobody's getting my full attention. And my kids will be like, Mom, did you hear me? And I'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. No, I didn't. I was answering an email. Give me just 1 second. I put my phone down. Yes, now I'm here. Tell me again. I'm listening. Because I think, we have a tendency to just try to do all the things, and means you're not doing any one of them really well.
No, and I'll tell you, it was a hard reality for me, because I was like, what do you mean? I do it's like the right recovering perfectionist, right?
Yep.
So for me, I thought it came with a little bit of shame, to be honest. And then, part of what I've also done, and this is part of also what I teach and what I've taught even my kids, is that if you want my attention and you see my eyes, on a phone, or, folding laundry or making dinner, instead of coming in a room and talking at me, right, where my attention is not on you, I'm really big on eye contact these days too, where it's say, excuse me, right? And, or there's times where I'll, go want somebody's attention, and I will literally stop talking if I don't have their eyes. And I'll say, can I have your eyes, please? Because that's how I know that they're like there with me, right? And I feel like our technology makes it so easy for us to disconnect and kind of like be half there too. And this is part of what I think is missing is this connection piece. And multitasking is not what it used to be. And I think that what's more important is really connecting with the people you love. And, given the world that we're in, it's like, how many more times do we have to be reminded with all these natural disasters happening that what's important is the people in your life and the people that you love. And, if there's anything that you can start doing today, it's like, hug your kids, hug your family, hug your loved ones, call your mom or dad, call your grandparents, because at the end of the day, what really matters.
It's true. And I think that probably speaks to one of the life lessons that most of us will get to the point of learning eventually. And we talk a lot about lessons on this podcast, failures are not failures. They're opportunities to learn something. Yes. So when you look back on your journey, what do you think is the common theme for you in your lessons?
So the common theme in my lessons is, honestly, it's my 2 words of the year, which are trust and surrender. Going back to what I said before about being type A personality, love being in control. That is when things become harder and take longer versus, when I trust and surrender, ultimately that is it's such a lesson that it's like a banging of my head against the wall at this point. It's okay, I hear you. I get it. Yes. I get it now. Yes. And it's something that I, honestly, yes, this is my self-care month, but really probably for the last year and a half, I've really been working at trust and surrender. And anytime I notice myself wanting to take back the wheel, I'm like, no, cruise control. You got this.
Yeah.
Let it self-drive, be the Tesla, right? So
be the Tesla. I love that.
I should make t-shirts, right?
That's amazing.
But it's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the biggest lesson. Like, I wasted so much time and energy. I gave away so much of my power thinking that I could control everything.
Yes.
And it depleted me to no end. And it never worked out the way I wanted. Versus when I get clear and I journal and I meditate and I manifest, it's amazing how the universe co-creates.
Yeah.
And there it is.
And there it is.
So that honestly has been the biggest.
And I think all of those things are just us getting out of the way.
Yes.
Just get out of the way, because all you have to do is say what you want. You got to show up, do the things that you're led to do. Let it be easy. Like we overcomplicate things, trying to control and trying to force our way. Like, we can make some shit happen for sure. But it's going to be harder the way we're going to choose to do it than if we just get out of the way, allow ourselves to trust ourselves and the universe to guide us. And I think, in one of my courses, I say there's the art of letting go. That's because there's an art to it. It's not a science. Like, there is a finesse that you have to learn to let go of the steering wheel to control the things. I mostly talk to myself when I say these things, but
don't we all? Well, but that gives like you walk the walk, you talk the talk, right? Like, there's nothing that you talk about that you don't tell yourself all the time, right?
100%.
And we're not always the best at following it either, like, I'll admit that, but it's the fact that we have it. It's the tool that we have in our toolkit that we can pull out, that it's like, oh yeah, I have this.
Yeah.
And then it happens. What I always say is that, like, when you build up your toolkit, it enables you to move through things more quickly. It's not that things don't happen, or that you're not confronted with things. It's that you just know how to move through them so much more quickly.
Yes.
So
it becomes less of a struggle and more of a dance, I say.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I had a tarot reading the other day, and she pulled this card, and I don't even remember which card it was, but she said it kind of looks like a medicine bottle. And she goes, I'm hearing, and she's a very intuitive, and she says, I think you need to take your own medicine, or you need to take your own advice. And I was like, shit. Yes, you're probably right. Okay, fine. I'll take my own advice. I give great advice. I'm not so great at taking it.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's so funny. You're not alone. So
that's all of us having this human experience.
Yes.
So when you think about the younger version of you, whichever phase in your life you would like to think about, what advice would you give her?
Oh, goodness. There's so much I would want to tell her. I think that, the biggest piece of advice, like what I'm hearing, I would tell myself, is to trust your intuition. Just, I wish I would have trusted it so much earlier. And, when I say that, what I really mean is to have ended the cycle of seeking external validation and learned more quickly how to trust myself. And that applies to a lot of different elements of my life, not just my divorce, but, career decisions, friendships, even, things I did post-divorce, right? I think that one of the things I love teaching is really exactly that. And if I could give that to my younger self, she would, it's interesting because it's like, I'm so happy where I am today. And I know, had I not been through everything that I have experienced, that I wouldn't have the life that I have today. And at the same time, I'm so curious that if I could go back and tell younger me, trust your gut, listen to your intuition, like you've got this. I'm curious how my life would be today too. So
yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of a theme that comes out of that question. A lot of people have the same sentiment, right? Like,
Sure.
it's funny because a few of my guests have been like, well, the younger me wouldn't have listened to me at all. So, like, giving advice, well, I guess. But yeah, I think I would also say the same thing to myself. Like, if I could just go back and say, trust yourself. I tell my daughters all the time, what other people think doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
If I could have learned that lesson sooner, I feel like I almost like I hesitate with this question a little bit myself because I don't want to eliminate the experiences I had because it gave me the wisdom I have now, right? The knowledge I gained was because of the experience. So I see the value there. But gosh, I feel like I could have just done some amazing things a whole lot sooner. And then I'm like, well, is faster better? This journey of life is about the experience and the ups and downs and the roller coaster. And, but yeah, I sure wish I could go back and save her a little heartache or a wee bit of time.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, really, time is kind of irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
The only time that really exists is the now. And,
Is the now.
so, but I do love what you said. Like, I love that it's almost like we also get to use this wisdom with our children. Cause I agree with you. I mean, I really implore my boys to, there's times we'll even say to them, well, what does your gut say?
Yes.
Well, okay, then go with it. Trust it. Right? Like, why are you looking to me? I don't know what the answer is. Like, what does your gut say? Right. And I think that, and I do think that in that question, I think there's an opportunity for us to almost pay it forward in the work that we do and the people that we have the privilege of being able to see us as a mentor, as a teacher.
Yeah. And I think I often wonder if my kids are even paying attention at all, but
they are.
They are.
They are.
They are. They're sponges. I know they are.
Yes.
But no, I'm like, do you even listen to me at all? My daughter actually told me yesterday, Mom, some of the things you say, a lot of them are kind of out there, but I mostly think you're probably right. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. All right, then. I just sat and soaked that up. I didn't say a word. Those moments are fleeting with children.
Oh my God. That's like the best. You're just like, and I'm going to drink to that,
and
right?
Scene.
Just like, soak that puppy up. That's the best. Oh, that must have felt so good.
It did. But I do try to pay it forward in that way. And I try to kind of set my children up to, I think, mostly just have a more fun experience. I think I could have probably not saved myself the heartache that I experienced because I think there's such value in heartache even. But I could have had some more fun along the way than I allowed myself to. And so I really think that would be my goal if I went back and tried to give the younger me advice. And so I try to do that for my kids because I figure, well, this is actually the first way that I thought, early in life, I was like, how am I going to leave this world better than I found it? Like this was the goal I had kind of burning inside of me. And I thought, well, I can raise great people who can go have this ripple effect. And so parenting my children was kind of the first step for me to be like, this is how I'm leaving the world better than I found it. But that just means I'm trying to tell them all the things I know. And most of the time they think it's out there.
Yeah. I mean, and that's all we can do, right?
Yeah. Yep. Well, so we haven't talked much about your podcast or your books. So tell us a little bit about those.
Sure. So I have my own podcast, which is called The Divorced Woman's Guide. And my little tagline on that is The Divorced Woman's Guide to Choosing You. And it's interesting because I started my podcast actually when COVID hit. So I was just starting to speak and take stages, and boom, we got smacked upside the head with staying home for 2 years. So I launched my podcast, and, ultimately what my podcast is intended to be is a resource for people. Really, it's about life transition. And really, a lot of what I talk about is similar to all of the experiences that I have gone through myself. So I'm speaking from the lens of experience. it talks about topics as it does relate to divorce, but I also, my married friends listen and they're like, oh my God, that episode that you did on communication was so valuable. And I was like, great. I'm so glad to hear.
Yeah.
But I talk about really pretty much anything and everything, right? Some new content that I'm really starting to push out is a lot more, soul awakening oriented, because that's really been the journey that I've been on, which is a good segue into my latest book that I'm a contributing author in. Since November of last year, I've been working with a spiritual coach, and last November, our mastermind group, we went to Egypt.
Oh, wow.
And I had a very, very soul awakening experience that honestly took a few months to ground into me, because I was very overwhelmed with what was happening and the messages that were coming in, and trying to make sense of everything that was coming out of Egypt. And so the book that I am a contributing author in, which you can buy on Amazon, it's called Unlocking the Matrix. And Karina Stewart is my coach, and she is the publisher of the book. I'm one of the authors in it. And you guys should buy it, because it's really, I talk about my journey, not just while I was there, but interestingly, since I was a little girl, I have been obsessed with Egypt. My soul was there in a past life for sure. And I know my soul was in a past life there with my coach too, because we were having these weird familiar moments together where I was like, oh yeah, that's yours. Like when it's, something in a museum, I'm like, that's your necklace. And she's like, what are you talking about? That's your necklace. And that's my ring. This is, what are we doing? What is happening?
What is happening?
And so, it talks about kind of how my trip really kind of lit me up inside to kind of see how I have always been it's almost like my soul has been led to go there. And while I was there, I was also in receipt of what I'm told and was given, what are called the lioness codes of forgiveness while I was there. So I talk a lot about what the hell is a code? What does that mean? To just kind of break it down in layman's terms around really what that looks like and what that means, and what my experiences were at the Great Pyramid, at the Sphinx, at some of the different, burial sites that we were at. It was a game-changing experience. And so it's interesting, because when I had that experience, I was also in the process of writing my own book, which is called Divorce Sucks, Now What? And that was released in February of 2023. Actually, it was released on my mom's birthday. My mom passed away in January of 2022. And so I released the book on her birthday. And ultimately, what my Divorce Sucks, Now What book really talks about is it's really my journey of my divorce and how it is that I created my 5-step rehab method. And it also talks about my journey alongside my mom. So the same day that I asked my ex-husband for a divorce, my mom was diagnosed with terminal ovarian cancer.
Oh, wow.
And so in the same day, I literally was like, I'm losing my 2 rocks. Eventually my mom and my ex-husband and I had a very not so good divorce, but we're super BFFs now, co-parenting. But the book also talks about my mom and my parallel path, and sort of, the theme of the book is really, it's not just about my 5-step method. It's really talking about this metamorphosis that I went through and that my mom went through, and how we were on this interesting and parallel path. And I talk a lot about how my mom has really become a very important part of my life since she has passed. There's some good nuggets in there that I don't want to give away, but
no spoilers.
But there's some good stuff in there about how it is that I know, how I can feel her, and how I know that she's here with me. And So that's my other book, again, also on Amazon, and you can buy the paperback or the Kindle version. So those are my 2 books. And ultimately my Divorce Sucks Now What book is kind of an end of my divorce focused chapter of my business.
Yeah.
And the Unlocking the Matrix, which released, 8/8/23, is sort of like this new business and brand that I'm coming into, which is really around awakening your soul. And ultimately what I'm really good at is helping women to awaken their soul. And the way that they do that is learning how to choose themselves, no matter where it is that they are in life, because so many of us don't know what that feels like. We don't know what that looks like. And so it really takes learning who it is that you are, understanding what your voice sounds like, and really allowing that to enable you to create the abundant life that you literally is waiting for you.
Yes.
And the only person standing in the way is you and your ego. So we get to move that out of the way to make sure that you're living your best life today.
I love that. And obviously I want people to go out and buy your books and follow you and find you. But if you had to leave them with one little nugget before that, in terms of, how do you choose you? What would be one tiny little thing you would tell them is a great starting point?
It's so funny. Somebody asked me this question the other day too. So the nugget that I would leave is, I think that the first step to choosing you is recognizing that you haven't. Because if you don't know what that feels like, then you're not going to know what choosing you is going to feel like. And so I start backwards.
Yeah.
So what does it feel like when you're not choosing yourself? And really get clear on that, because when that feeling goes away is when you know that you're doing something for yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's so good. Listen, this has been such a beautiful conversation. I personally can't wait to read both of your books. I'm a big reader, so I will be getting them, but I will definitely be sure that I provide all of that information in the show notes. But lastly, how can people find you?
Well, I am all over social media. So you guys can look for me with my name, Wendy Sterling. And honestly, my website is probably the best place. It's wendysterling.net. Get on my email list, and it's the easiest way to find me. And then social media, like I said, just look for Wendy Sterling, and I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, Pinterest. I also have a YouTube channel for my podcast, which is The Divorced Woman's Guide, which you can subscribe to. And then my podcast is on every major podcast platform. I mean, anything and everything out there. So
I love
that's
it.
me.
You're in all the places. Well, people will go find you, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I have loved this conversation. It's been a pleasure to get to know you.
You as well. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Did you like this episode, or did you love it? Inquiring minds want to know. The best way to support this show is to subscribe and leave a review. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.